Hey everyone, I never thought I'd be sitting here telling strangers this, but I can't keep it inside anymore. Hardworking man I thought was my forever. Life felt safe and normal until I started sharing secret intimate moments with my father-in-law every single day, and my husband just found out. My husband works long hours at the office, so most days I'm alone at home with his father, who moved in with us temporarily after his own divorce. I told myself it was just family helping family. I was lonely, a little bored, and still adjusting to married life. That's how it all began. Every morning my father-in-law would make coffee while I worked at the kitchen table. A Chi-S in his late 50s, strong from years of manual labor, with a calm presence that made the house feel less empty. We started chatting about small things: my job stress, his lonely days. The power imbalance was subtle. He was the elder, the homeowner, the one who fixed things when they broke. I was the young bride trying to prove I belonged. At first it was nothing, just people sharing the quiet house. I'd sit there in my loose sweater, fingers tapping on the laptop, and I'd slide a warm mug beside me. His hand would linger a second longer than necessary on the handle, the heat from his skin brushing the edge of mine. I'd feel that tiny spark race up my arm and tell myself it was only the coffee, but my breath would catch anyway. He smelled like fresh soap and something deeper, woody, steady, the kind of scent that settles in your chest and makes the air feel heavier. I'd lean back in my chair sometimes, pretending to stretch, and he'd be right there, close enough that I could sense the warmth radiating from his chest through his flannel shirt. Nothing happened. Not really. Yet every time our eyes met over the rim of that mug, something inside me tightened. A slow, guilty pull, like Aldent name. I kept reminding myself he was my husband's father. This man had raised the person I promised to love forever. I was supposed to be building a life with my husband, not noticing how gently his dad poured the cream, or how his low voice rumbled softly when he asked if I slept well. But the house was so quiet during the day. My husband's side of the bed felt cold when he left before dawn, and here was this steady presence filling the silence without asking for anything. One morning the power went out for a few minutes. I laughed nervously in the sudden arc, and he stepped closer to check the breaker box behind my chair. His arm brushed my shoulder as he reached past me. Just fabric against fabric, but the contact sent a rush of warmth flooding through me. I forgot how to breathe for a second. He murmured something about old wiring, his breath warm near my ear, and I sat frozen, heart hammering, thinking, this is wrong, pull away right now. I didn't move. The lights flickered back on, and he stepped back with a quiet chuckle, like it was nothing, but my skin kept tingling where he'd been. I stared at my screen without seeing a single word, cheeks burning, telling myself it was only the surprise of the dark. Still, when he placed the next cup of coffee down, I found myself glancing up at him longer than I should have, noticing the faint lines at the corners of his eyes, the way his shoulders filled out his shirt. Days blurred together like that. Small talks stretched into longer conversations. I'd ask about my deadlines and actually listen, his calm gaze making me feel seen in a way my exhausted husband rarely could lately. I'd catch myself laughing at his dry jokes, the sound to brighten the empty kitchen. Every time he fixed something around the house, a loose cabinet, a flickering lamp, I'd hover nearby, watching those strong hands work with quiet confidence. The subtle power imbalance hummed between us. He knew how everything worked here, including, it seemed, how to make the lonely young wife feel less adrift. I hated how much I looked forward to those mornings. I'd wake up telling myself today I'd keep more distance. So close our knees nearly touched under the wood. I felt the gravity of it, this invisible pull that made my pulse quicken even when we were only talking about the weather. That was the worst part. He'd just be there, steady, warm. My mind whispered warnings, sharp and ashamed. HES family. You're married. Stop noticing his hands. Stop breathing in his scent like it's air you need. Yet every afternoon when my husband texted that he'd be late again, a secret little thrill would flicker low in my stomach. I told myself it was harmless. Just company. Just conversation. But deep down I already knew the ache was growing, and the next morning always came too soon. The tension kept building in those quiet spaces between us, like a storm gathering on the horizon I refused to acknowledge. I wondered how much longer I could pretend everything was still innocent, before something shifted that we couldn't take back. One morning I was standing at the kitchen counter, reaching for a mug on the top shelf, when he came up behind me without a sound. His chest brushed against my shoulder as he stretched past, the solid warmth of him pressing just enough to make the air between us feel suddenly thinner. That woody aftershave mixed with the clean scent of soap drifted over me, wrapping around my senses like something I shouldn't want but cowldn't push away. A flush of heat bloomed low in my belly, unexpected and sharp. I laughed it off, a shaky little sound that didn't fool either of us, and muttered something about being too short for this house. But inside my head the words were screaming, "This is wrong. Achies, your husband's father. Yuri married." Still, my feet stayed planted. I didn't step aside. Not even an inch. The next week the contact lingered longer, like the house itself was conspiring. I was trying to adjust my chair at the makeshift desk in the corner, struggling with the height when he offered to help. His large hands settled on my waist, firm yet careful, guiding the seat just so. Those extra seconds stretched into something dangerous. Electricity raced up my spine, hot and tingling, making my breath hitch in my throat. I could feel the heat of his palms through the thin fabric of my blouse, steady and sure. My mind raced. "Pull away right now, Yuri married. This can't happen." My body refused. I stayed perfectly still, letting the moment breathe between us, heart pounding so loud I was sure he could hear it echoing in the quiet room. That night, lying beside my husband in the dark, guilt crashed over me like cold water. What kind of wife am I turning into? This is disgusting. Achies family. I squeezed my eyes shut, trying to focus on the familiar rhythm of my husband's breathing, but my thoughts kept drifting back. The faint scent of his father's aftershave still clung to my memory, warm and grounding. The way those hands had rested on me, not demanding, just present. I told myself it was nothing, just the loneliness stalking after another long day alone. Innocent, but deep down, a quieter voice whispered the truth. I was already aching for the next morning, already wondering what small excuse would bring us close again. Days kept folding into each other, each one pulling the thread a little tighter. He never forced anything. That made it worse. Achi'd simply be there when I needed something reached, or when a drawer stuck, his body moving with that quiet confidence that made the whole house feel steadier. One afternoon while I typed away at deadlines, he stepped behind me again to grab a book from the shelf above. His arm grazed my back, the fabric of his shirt whispering against mine, and I forgot how to exhale. Warmth flooded through me, pooling in places I tried desperately to ignore. I stared at the screen, letters blurring, cheeks burning hot. Inside I was splitting into stop this, walk away, remember who you are. Yet my shoulders stayed relaxed, almost leaning into the nearness, craving the gravity that kept drawing me back. Later that same week, helping me with the printer that kept jamming, his fingers brushed my hand as he leaned in to fix the paper tray. The touch was brief, accidental maybe, but it sent sparks dancing across my skin. I froze, pulse thundering, telling myself over and over that it meant nothing. He was just being kind, helpful, family, but my mind replayed it anyway, the roughness of his fingertips, the steady calm in his voice when he said it was sorted now. That night in bed again, my husband asleep beside me, I lay awake staring at the ceiling. Shame burned in my chest, sharp and unrelenting. How could I let these tiny moments live rent-free in my head? Yet when sleep finally came, my dreams carried the echo of his warmth, the low rumble of his laugh, the way the air felt charged whenever he stood just a little too close. I kept fighting it, I swear I did. Every evening I'd promise myself tomorrow would be different, more distance, less lingering in the kitchen, no more stolen glances when he poured my coffee. But morning always arrived with the smell of fresh brew and the soft sound of his footsteps. It'd tell my reflection I was stronger than this pull, that I loved my husband, that this was just a silly crush born from too many empty hours. Then I'd walk into the room and find him there, steady as ever, asking if I slept well with that gentle concern in his eyes. And just like that, the resistance would crumble a fraction more. The hunger grew quieter but deeper, a secret I carried alone, trembling with every almost touch, every shared breath in the silent house. By the end of that week, sitting across from him at the table with our knees nearly brushing underneath, I felt the storm inside me building. My heart raced at nothing and everything. I knew I was balancing on the edge of something we could never undo, and part of me, the part I was terrified to name, was already leaning forward, breathless, waiting for the moment it would finally break. Soon our little accidents started happening every single day, like the house itself was conspiring to push us closer. After lunch, when the afternoon light slanted through the curtains and the quiet settled heavy around us, he would step behind my chair while I sat at the desk answering emails. His hands would find my shoulders, thumbs pressing slow circles into the knots I carried from staring at the screen too long. The roughness of his palms against my thin blouse sent tiny shivers racing down my spine. I could smell the faint trace of his aftershave, woody and warm, wrapping around me until my next breath felt stolen. One afternoon his fingers drifted lower, tracing the edge of my collarbone with a gentleness that made my eyes flutter shut. I didn't pull away. Instead, I leaned back just a fraction, letting a soft sigh escape before I could catch it. Heat bloomed low in my belly, flooding every hidden corner of me with a craving I had no name for. My mind screamed that this was wrong, that he was my husband's father, that any second the front door could open and everything would shatter. Yet my body stayed perfectly still, hungry for the next press of those strong hands. Weeks slipped by in this fragile, secret bubble we built between stolen moments. He made me feel seen in ways my husband, always rushing between meetings and late calls, never quite managed anymore. He would listen when I complained about a tough deadline, his voice low and steady, offering quiet advice that somehow fixed more than the problem itself. In return, I started cooking his favorite dishes, the ones my husband barely noticed. I chose blouses he once said looked nice on me, letting the fabric sit a little looser around my neckline. Our touches grew bolder in tiny, breathless ways. A kiss on the cheek that lasted to heartbeats too long, fingers brushing under the dinner table while we pretended to watch television. The secrecy wrapped around me like silk, thrilling and terrifying all at once. Every night I would lie beside my sleeping husband, comparing the ordinary to the electric charge that filled the house whenever my father-in-law and I were alone. Guilt twisted sharp in my chest, but it only made the next days pull stronger. I was alive in a way I hadn't been in months, and the shame of that truth burned hotter than any touch. I began choosing lighter clothes around the house, thin summer tops and soft shorts that let the air kiss my skin. Knowing his eyes would find me, mornings came with a flutter in my stomach I couldn't ignore, excitement blooming before my feet even touched the floor. I told myself it was harmless, just harmless attention, but the mirror caught the flush on my cheeks and the way my hands trembled slightly when I brushed my hair. Then one afternoon my husband called to say he would be late again, his voice distracted and tired on the line. The moment I hung up, the air in the living room thickened. My father-in-law was already there, standing closer than usual. His hands found me fully this time, sliding with careful hunger over the curves I had unconsciously offered him for weeks. That same woody scent surrounded us, grounding and dizzying. I whispered against his shoulder, voice barely a thread, we can't keep doing this. But my body betrayed every word. It arched toward him, trembling with a pleasure so deep it scared me, guilt and surrender crashing together until I cowled until where one ended and the other began. In that suspended second, with his breath warm against my hair and my heart hammering loud enough to drown out reason, I gave in completely. And just as the last of my resistance melted away, I heard the faint sound of a car door closing outside, the car door slammed shut like a gunshot in the quiet afternoon. My heart lurched hard against my ribs. I tried to step back, but his hands stayed on my waist 1 second longer than they should have. Heavy, warm. Footsteps on the porch. The key turning. I barely had time to smooth my hair before the door swung open. My husband stood there, briefcase still in hand, tie loosened from the long day. His eyes found us instantly. The way my father-in-law's fingers rested just above my hip, the flush burning across my cheeks, the air still thick with that forbidden electricity neither of us had managed to hide. He didn't shout. He didn't move at first. Just stood frozen in the doorway, face draining of color until it looked like someone had punched the breath out of him. Those familiar eyes, the ones that once looked at me with tired love after late nights, filled slowly with something raw and breaking, shock. Then betrayal so deep it made my stomach twist into knots. And underneath it all, a heartbreak so quiet hurt worse than screaming ever could. I opened my mouth, but nothing came out. My father-in-law's hand finally dropped away, the absence of his touch leaving my skin cold and aching in a way that felt like punishment already. My husband's gaze flicked between us, slow and deliberate, taking in every tiny detail we thought we'd kept secret. The way my blouse had slipped slightly off one shoulder, the faint tremble still running through my fingers. He took one step inside, then another, but it felt like the whole world had tilted. How long? His voice was barely above a whisper, cracked at the edges like thin ice. No anger in it yet. Just this hollow disbelief that cut deeper than any yell. Tears gathered in his eyes, but he blinked them back hard, jaw-tight, refusing to let them fall in front of us. In that moment, the fantasy we'd wrapped ourselves in cracked wide open, spilling ugly reality all over the living room floor. I wanted to reach for him, to explain how it started so small and snowballed into this hunger I couldn't control anymore. But my feet stayed rooted, guilt flooding every vein until I felt sick with it. My father-in-law uttered something low and ashamed, backing toward the hallway, but my husband just shook his head once, slow, final. Then he turned and walked out without another word. The door clicked shut behind him softer than it should have, leaving a silence so heavy it pressed down on my chest until breathing hurt. Now I'm sitting here alone on the edge of our bed, the one we used to share every night, fingers twisting the sheets that still smell faintly like both of them. My heart feels shattered into pieces too small to ever fit back together right. Part of me keeps replaying those stolen daily moments, the quiet way he made me feel wanted when everything else felt routine. The warmth of attention that filled the empty spaces my husband's busy life had left behind. But mostly I feel this deep, nauseating guilt that sits like a stone in my throat. Fear of losing everything we built, fear that I've broken something precious beyond repair. I don't know if he'll ever forgive me, if our marriage can survive the weight of what I let happen, if our family won't just crumble quietly while we pretend everything's okay. Tell me honestly, you think I'm a terrible person for letting it go this far? Should I fight for my marriage with everything I have left, or let it slip away before I cause even more damage? Drop your thoughts below if you want to hear exactly what happened in those secret daily moments. Subscribe and I'll share the full uncensored story in the next video. I need your support right now more than ever. The house feels too quiet without him. And somewhere deep down, even through all this ache, I still miss the pull that started it all. What if I never feel that alive again?